Hello everyone. If you're watching this video but haven't watched the video on identifying the research problem yet, I recommend you stop this video and go watch that first. It also helps if you've already identified your own research problem. If you haven't done that yet, again, I highly recommend writing down a research problem even if it's not yet your final one. We will need those contexts for this next video, where we will focus on setting up a possible intervention that will solve the problem we identified. Ready? Let's go! In the previous video, I introduced you to Binibining Marites, a math teacher who identified 7 learners who were struggling in her math class. In particular, these 7 learners had difficulty performing operations on signed numbers or integers. I think some of you have your own war flashbacks about positive and negative numbers too. Now, without these skills, it would be exponentially difficult for her learners to keep up with their current math lessons. Binibining Marites had an idea for an intervention that can potentially help her students. But before we talk about what Binibining Marites plans to do, let us first talk about what intervention is. In the action research that you are going to write, the intervention is basically a plan of action that you will make to solve the problem that you identified. Now, most teachers think of a novel program to incorporate this intervention, and thus this qualifies to be an innovation. Meanwhile, the specific tasks within this intervention are the strategies that you will be using to hopefully address the problem that you identified. Now, if you can still remember our discussion from the first week, one of the things emphasized about action research is that it does not aim to produce generalizable knowledge. This means that as an action researcher, you do not have the burden to prove that the intervention that you will use will be effective for a larger population. In fact, you are not even looking to see whether or not your intervention is effective at all. This means, and this seems a bit counterintuitive, but allow me to explain what I mean. For many years, the research tradition that we have been exposed to is the experimental or quasi-experimental approach. This is the research design where we have at least 2 groups of learners, with one group receiving a treatment or a proposed intervention, while the other group receives the traditional instruction. After a period of time, differences between these 2 groups are determined to see if the treatment group performed significantly better than the control group. Because theoretically, all that is different between the 2 groups is the treatment, in the experimental research design, all we are interested in is the presence of the significant difference between the 2 groups. If there is a significant difference, we claim that the treatment is a better alternative to traditional instruction. This is likely the kind of research we went through when we were in school, because this is also the kind of research our professors have been traditionally exposed to. But this is not what action research is all about. Action research is hardly interested in finding significant differences after the intervention. In the first place, there is no control group to compare the treatment group to. So, if action research is not interested in finding significant differences, what is it interested in? Well, action research is interested in what happened during the intervention. Yep, you heard me right. And let me repeat that for dramatic effect. Action research is interested in what happened during the intervention. Now, here's another difference between the experimental research design and the action research design. In the experimental research design, the experimenter, well, that's the researcher, by the way, is one of the constants that should be the same in both the control and treatment group. In other words, the researcher does not matter. All that matters is the intervention and its effect, if any, on the members of the treatment group. Now, with action research, the researcher, and yes, that's you, the researcher is practically the main participant of the study. As the researcher, you're not just interested in how the intervention affects your learners. Rather, you're very much interested in how you react to everything that happens during the intervention process. This is the reflective and self-evaluative nature of action research that is almost absent from experimental research. This means you're not really looking for the effectiveness of an intervention. Instead, you are investigating how you, as the researcher, deliver instruction and adjust accordingly depending on what happens with your learners. This is one of the things that I love about action research. It forces us to be accountable with whatever happens in our classroom. And most of all, we don't need any special skill to conduct action research. We have been practically doing it ever since we started teaching. If you don't believe me, I ask that you imagine teaching in your classroom. You give a quiz, and it turns out that some of your students failed that quiz. Do you go on like nothing happened? I don't think so. I think what you did was to come up with strategies to make sure that those who got low scores would be able to learn the things that they did not learn. Maybe you gave remedial sessions. Maybe you focused on getting them to recite more than usual. Maybe you talked to them or their parents to find out what was wrong. Maybe you decided to play a game in your next class to get them motivated. Now, guess what? All of these are interventions. You assessed the situation, created a plan of action, and you tried it out. And then, when it did not work, did you keep on using the same strategy? I didn't think so. I think you interjected and adjusted accordingly depending on your observations and the differences in the performance or behavior of your students. Well, isn't that practically almost the entire action research process right there? Do you know the only thing you did not do? You did not note everything down. Writing down what happened is a crucial part of the research process because it allows you to have a documentation of what you did so that you can eventually communicate your findings to others. That is why action research is such a great research design for classroom teachers. We don't need any fancy training to do this. We don't need a lot of resources either. We just need to be conscious about documenting everything. That's why I'd like to call action research chica chica with insights. You basically just make chica chica what you did and provide possible explanations as to why things happened the way they did. Later in this course, we will be teaching you ways to make sure you get to note everything down. But for now, let's go back to Binibining Marites and her plan of action or her intervention. One of the first things that Binibining Marites did was to do a quick literature review on operations on signed numbers. How did she do this? Well, she just went to Google Scholar, typed in strategies for solving problems with positive and negative numbers, and the website gave her millions of articles with different strategies already being used by teachers and researchers. Now, although a literature review is not needed in making our action research proposals, it provides a lot of help in coming up with strategies that we can modify to suit our own context. Look for articles that relate very closely to your own context. If possible, look for research done locally. So, Binibining Marites read a few journal articles and took note of important aspects of the research. She made annotated bibliographies of the articles and books that she read. A plan was starting to form in her mind. Next, Binibining Marites consulted Mrs. Esponita. Mrs. Esponita is her co-teacher who has been teaching mathematics for more than 20 years already. Binibining Marites told her about her problem and asked for advice on what to do. Mrs. Esponita was more than glad to help out Binibining Marites. Binibining Marites' next stop was the guidance counselor's office. This time, she told Mr. Sanson, the guidance counselor, about her classroom concerns, and Mr. Sanson empathetically offered her some advice. Finally, Binibining Marites went to her principal, Mrs. Santa Rita. She relayed to her what she has done so far and told her that she was interested in coming up with an intervention to solve the problem she faced. Mrs. Santa Rita told her, "Well, Marites, you are in luck. The regional office is currently working with the UP Visayas Action Research Project and is offering an online distance learning program. You should apply to the course because this looks like a great opportunity to do an action research." Sorry, I had too much fun there creating Binibining Marites' story. So anyway, after doing her literature review and after talking to relevant school personalities, Binibining Marites finally decided on a learning intervention. She would plan out an intervention that would last 8 weeks. She will hold 45-minute remedial sessions 3 times a week for the learners that she found struggling in her class. The first and last weeks will be dedicated to orientation and debriefing. So the implementation of the intervention itself will just be for 6 weeks. They will set up a students' cooperative and role play relevant and authentic transactions but using only play money. She would structure the week so that the Monday session is spent on discussing concepts. Tuesday sessions will be used to pair learners with one another so that they can work together on solving drill exercises related to the topic. On Thursday, students will role-play transactions that will apply what they have learned for the week. Before every session ends, Binibining Marites will ask the students to complete a minute paper. A minute paper is just a 1-minute writing activity where the students will answer prompts that may be related to the cognitive or affective or maybe even personal aspects of their learning. Binibining Marites used the following matrix to draw up a rough schedule for her intervention. Feel free to pause the video at this point so that you can take a good look at how this matrix is. And so now, it's your turn to develop a plan of action for the problem that you identified. Feel free to check the internet for inspiration. Go to Google Scholar for researchers or researches done by other practitioners in the field. Talk to your fellow teachers, to your EPs, to your school heads, or to your principals. Just start with something simple. Share it with your co-participants here in the course through the discussion forum and help one another improve your interventions. I hope you've gained valuable insights on crafting an action plan to tackle the identified research problem. Remember, the learning process is yours to own. Feel free to watch the video as many times as you need to grasp the concepts thoroughly. And don't hesitate to ask questions in the comments section. We will do our best to respond to all your questions, although sometimes it might take some time. Engaging in dialogue can deepen your understanding and enhance the learning process. So, also feel free to respond to your classmates or your co-participants' questions. Let's enjoy continuing this journey of discovery and problem solving together. See you in the next video.